Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. I'm joined by Bam and Tony, and today we're going to be talking about which player we think is going to be ranked number one in 2024 and how close we have this current storyline of the top four players coming out of 2023. I think it's pretty obvious that aola has locked himself in as ranked number one for 2023. But before we get into that, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Show us the support. And if you guys have questions that you want us to answer on the podcast, you guys can go ahead and subscribe to our Patreon, where we have a question tab there where we check out all those questions and we'll answer them here on the podcast. So, it's been a long time. It's been a while. I hope you guys had a great holidays. How's your new year going so far, Bam?
It's been hectic, a lot of work stuff, and so just trying to move forward on that. But all in all, grateful for a new year, new opportunities for everybody. All right, and it's going to be interesting time in like esports in general. I know we talked about that a little bit, but what I am excited for is just kind of general what's going to be happening for platform fighters, and also just kind of the storylines that we've been seeing in Smash as of late. I mean, I know initially people were kind of like sad about certain characters and whatnot, but it's been cool to see people kind of rise and back and forth, especially with this having let's make big moves, man. That was such a sick tournament to see, and I think that was a great tournament to open up the year, and especially we're on the precipice of Genesis, so I don't know. Every time, like people always get sad at the end of the year, and it's usually like then beginning of the year we have some couple tournaments, and then we have Genesis, and everyone's like, "Oh, we love Smash again," and everyone gets so hyped. So so
Seasonal depression, bro.
yeah, it's a classic. This always happens, so never fails. So I'm excited.
What about you, Tony?
I'll be honest, I still haven't recovered from Let's Make Moves in Miami. So I'm just doing my best to, kind of keep working hard, get through there.
Yeah, I was feeling a
Same as you
little
guys.
sick. Yeah, I was feeling a little sick after lmbm. So yeah, it's a lot of people in one area, and obviously we're in New York as well. So yeah, just
Well,
walking around in New York, and it was just
I am
cold.
fortunate on that end. I have, so somehow I've gone to a major every single month, and outside of like food poisoning back in like June, I have somehow not contracted a single illness on any of these events.
Impressive immunity system.
Blessed,
very.
hashtag blessed. Too blessed to be stressed.
There
Yes,
you go.
sir.
Hashtag never punished. All right.
Yes, sir.
So we can go ahead and get right into it. We got all the stats too from 2023. So excited to get into all the nitty gritty. So I think Walt made a video. Shout outs to Walt for making a video on Watch the Throne talking about the four horsemen, which are pretty much aola, Mia, Spargo, and Sonics, right? These are, I think it's very clear that these are the top the top four players. And I think before we even saw port priority, I think a lot of people previously to port priority would have even put aola and Mia on their own tier as one and two, interchangeable. But aola, if we're going for the entire year, is going to have that, right, in terms of rankings. But I think before port and seeing, a more recent end of the year kind of like reminder of like, oh, okay, this is how Sonics does against aola Mia. This is how Spargo does versus aola Mia. Because I think the big question mark was like, okay, aola and Mia have leveled up so much, maybe they can beat Spargo now, right? And then we haven't really even seen Sonics play against aola and Mia for like they have of all the head-to-heads, that's probably the one with the least amount of data, right, Tony, if I'm not mistaken. So
he's got 5 sets total,
right? And that all happened like within port party and Watch the Throne, right, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe
yes.
There's a couple of rogue ones outside of that, but yeah, that was the
No,
first time we saw Sonics really play against them. And it's pretty interesting because I think in terms of ranking, aola and Mia will be ranked higher than Sonics and Spargo, right? And I think that's going to be factors kind of like outside of the game. I think just being in Japan, you have access to like all the premier tiers, right? And like we've said many times in this podcast before, it's not like we're hating on that. That's just the way it is. Before, all the Japanese players had to come to US tournaments. Now it's kind of flipped around where we're seeing more global talent be attracted to Japan, and I'm happy for that scene. That scene has worked incredibly hard to get that, and if you look at their viewership, man, it's crazy. Some of their VODs almost get like 1 million views, which is like the stream VODs, which is insane. I was actually looking at some numbers for Watch the Throne specifically, and saw that East Geek Smash restreamed Watch the Throne, and even like day 3 or day 1 of Watch the Throne, which is typically usually the viewership side, right? And it's also not a Japanese event, and it's just like a Japanese channel restreaming an English event, still had 116 or like still 6-digit views, over 100K views, which is insane for Smash, right? Or insane for anything, honestly. So shouts to them, they get amazing viewership. But yeah, because of that, you know, it's crazy because ranks 3 and 4 have a winning head to head on ranks like 1 to 2. So I guess we could start off with that. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Do you guys think it's like just a matchup thing, right? I definitely feel like it's a matchup thing. I think Spargo and Sonics, I think both their characters do well against Mia and aoola's lineup, and I think Mia and aoola's lineup is definitely not like this is like the new age, right? This is the new matchups that if you can't beat or you don't know how to win, you probably aren't going to win a major that all 4 of these players are in attendance. You have to be able to beat Game & Watch and Steve. And then because even both of them play Steve, because now Mia has the pocket Steve, right? So I think it's just them being very attuned to the new meta because of how much they play on Wi-Fi, and also just their characters having very specific outs in the matchup. What are your thoughts, ma'am?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that their characters do pretty well. I think that also, again, when it comes to like Spargo and Sonics, I also think that they're on like when you look at some of the other players at that echelon, like they're the ones who are willing to kind of just study and go and just learn more, right? Like really just be studious about interactions and go from there. Like clearly, when you are a character with swords, there's going to be some advantage in terms of like breaking some of the blocks. Then it's like, obviously if you have speed to really kind of showcase where Steve has problems in like his movement, right? Outside of like, his specials and stuff like that, that's like you're going to be able to abuse those things. But yeah, I think that it's obviously a combination, right? It's a combination of those characters be like, not as lost as some other characters on the roster would be up against a Game and Watch and up against Steve. But I also think that they just like they play it a lot better. Like the way I've seen people interact with like Game and Watch's Dare, for example, or not knowing when they can, like in certain cases, if they are doing up B into you and you block, like where you can actually get punishes, those kind of things. Like those things go a long way with these characters, right? I think there's a lot of times people have this idea when they don't really go and really invest a ton into matchups. They do like, okay, I'm just gonna play safer, right? And it like, yeah, that makes sense, right? But when you're getting to that level with these kind of players are that good, it can't just be, oh well, I'm just gonna block and then like just hope for the best type thing. And I think sometimes players do that. I still think that I think people gotten better at the Steve matchup and at the Game Watch matchup, but I do think there's somewhat of a gap of knowledge on those characters still amongst like some of the top players, right? And it's very clear when you see someone like it's like, oh, okay, I know how to play that matchup. Like we talk about Mudace all the time, right? And it's like, Mudace is obviously an insane player, but like I think also too, like those particular matchups, like you can tell that he has a better understanding than some of the other players that people would argue are above him, right? So I think those things are also need to be taken into account.
What about you, Tony?
So my perspective is that people still suck at the Steve matchup so bad, and so I think that Mia and aola just coming into North American Wi-Fi in general, or the era when we actually had Steves in the wilderness, they would have had a much more difficult time. But most of our top players at that time weren't participating in like the coin box environments. And so I don't think it's a coincidence that the coin box toppers then went on and just absolutely ate aola up. That to be fair, they're the only ones who eat aola up, as we were discussing before we started this. Like aola is far and away the highest winning percentage against both the field and like top 10. Mm-hmm. Like his win percentage barely drops as you improve the player skill, to the point where him playing against unranked players and top 10 players is like an 8% difference now,
which is insane.
It is insane. Yeah, insane. The drop off. So
yeah, round 1, round 10 don't matter. same thing to me.
Everybody's a buy.
Yeah.
So the idea there is that you have this player who's just an absolute tour de force, but like if players aren't winning or aren't learning the matchup to win against him, then that's whatever. Like people still don't know how to sequence blocks. They don't understand that the Steve matchup actually has multiple phases because, in their credit, almost no matchup has multiple phases, and the ones that do are very obvious. So things like Pac-Man, where you're jumping over the hydrant,
Yeah.
or and getting matchup checks, like you're jumping over the hydrant, you're doing something wrong generally. So people don't understand that you have to play minigame and then you get to play mix-up game and neutral after you feel like that. So people just feel entitled to rush these characters down in positions where they haven't actually earned the right to do so. They haven't earned pressure. It's easy to say characters like Sonic can rush them down, but what other Sonic is giving aola problems? Like he absolutely dumpsters Ken. Like, and that's no shade to Ken. Ken is currently the second best Sonic in the world right now. Like, but he's not taking sets off of aola.
Yeah.
So
the last one was pretty close. I think it was game 5, game 4, game 5. But like Ken's able to take games, but it's nowhere. The gap is very clear because it's like, well, can aola even take games off of Sonics? You know what I mean? When you have to flip the question the other way, that's when it gets crazy. I think you mentioned that aola has taken one game off Sonics, one singular game.
Yes. I believe that's the impression. I think they've played 7 games. So now
he runs through him.
Yes. Now you could say it's not fair to say Sonic has like an 85-86% win rate against aola in games, but that's not a big enough sample size to actually judge what it would look like if they were to sit down and play 100 games. But that's another thing, to be fair, that kind of inflates aola's consistency is he has played much fewer sets than against like both the field in general and against ranked players in particular than Sonics and Spargo have, and Mia even more so than aola. So I think I was doing the math, and like their ranked sets were, I want to say Spargo has almost or more than 10 times as many ranked sets as Mia does versus the ranked players and top 10 in particular. And then he has something like 5 times as many sets as aola, roughly. It's a little bit less than that, but the idea here is that as your sample size increases, if you are having a hot run at the start, then it's going to kind of change the percentages in a way that makes things look different than they actually are. So we'll see. My most anticipated thing that I'm looking for going into 2024 is what Mia and aola's consistency is going to look like as players get a larger sample size, as you get more repeat sets where they run into these players a second time. So it's easy to say that Spargo is less consistent than the other 3 players in question because he has more unranked losses. But then if you only look at like top 10 sets, Spargo is second only to aola on win percentage. So it really depends on what part of the field we're looking at when we're looking at consistency and efficacy. So my question there is, Charles, what are you looking forward to most in 2024?
Ooh, this is good. I think the race to number 1 has never been so close. I think there's always been a clear and dominating player in Ultimate, that a gap has been shown, right? And I think for over half the lifetime of this game, we've had a uncontested GOAT of the game, which is MkLeo. Leo is not currently like in the conversation for number 1, unfortunately, but for how and another thing is like I also think Leo is just extremely godlike, and his run at lmbm was really fun to watch. I think he's like kind of back on the upswing. But when we're just talking about rank number 1 and the contention for rank number 1, be very clear, when Leo was number 1, it was like by a landslide. And when he, especially pre-quarantine, when he was like extremely dominant, he was still dominant after like a little bit after quarantine. I would say maybe like a year after quarantine, he was still dominant, uncontested number 1. But pre-quarantine, it's like on a bad day, this guy's getting second. On a bad day, he's getting second place. That's like the worst case. Like that is crazy. And then every other time it's first. So he was like miles ahead of the meta, if you guys like didn't watch early Ultimate. I'm sure most of the viewers have. So
Mhm.
coming after Leo's dominance, then we had the aola dominance, which was very recently, right? Like this last year or so, maybe last year or two or whatnot, right? So that I feel like was also not as dominating as Leo. I think there was maybe some question marks, but with how the ranking is specifically structured, I think it went into Akola's favor because I think there might have been a bit of a contention if you broke up the rankings into like 6-month periods. Like, some of the other PGR rankings was done. It was like 6-month periods, right? I also just think that's more interesting because if someone just dominates for 6 months, it's Jover, right? Like lock it in. Doesn't matter how the rest of the year goes. Like they could probably just not attend anything and get the spot. Of course, Akola still competed and still
Mhm.
did very well, but it was pretty like after SmashCon, we all knew that Akola was ranked number one, and I think that's very bad for a ranking system where it's like, oh well, we are done with the season in December, but by August, you know who's going to be ranked number one already. Everyone knew Akola was going to be ranked number one after SmashCon, right?
Mhm.
Once Spargo and Sonics had that inconsistent dip, it's over because Akola's not going to have that inconsistent dip. Like it might be possible, but especially with, I mean, all these players in top four play really broken characters, but I think the in terms of like who's going to cruise by in pools, like what character's going to do that, it's going to be Steve. You know what I'm saying? So it's I think, and Akola was so consistent up until then, right? So I don't think it's any surprise that Akola is ranked
Mhm.
number one. But coming into 2024, I guess all me talking about all this is to build up this point that coming into 2024, that's when Mia started getting that 3-win streak on Akola, right? Like, so Mia was starting to strike back against Akola. And then also towards the end of the year, I think a big question mark was like, oh, well, Akola and Mia have leveled up so much. Can Spargo still smoke them? Answer is yes. Watch the throne.
Mhm.
Mia Spargo was a very close set, though. That was very winnable for Mia. I thought that was interesting. And I think Spargo showcased like, yeah, I still smoke Coca-Cola, Aegis or or Aegis or Steve, it don't matter, right? So I think the dominance for Spargo Cola is still there, but Mia Spargo, I'm very interested to see this year, and I'm
Mhm.
also very interested to see like how we also got to finally see Sonics kind of the one of the four horsemen of the game right now, right? Just like one of the four players running up, because I think right now you tier it in the top four players. Sonics we got to see do so well versus both Aquila and Mia. So I guess what I want to ask you guys is if I'm hoping to God the next ranking is a 6-month period. But if it's not, let's just talk like it's a 6 month period because I don't want to say like, all right, a year is so long. So I don't want to be like, oh, the best player of 2024 is going to be this. I'd rather just talk about like the next somewhat foreseeable future, which is like the next
Yeah,
six
the
months,
first
right?
half. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
who do you guys think is going to be the best player in the first half of 2024? And my personal answer is Sonics. I think Sonics is like the only thorn in his side is Spargo has like a kind of has the edge on him, right? On the head to head, Tony, when it comes to numbers.
So there's a lot of different ways to look at their head to head.
Right.
So
Offline head to head.
we well, yeah, so that's one way to look at it is offline head to head, and then it's a matter of over what time period are we looking at?
Let's look
Mhm.
at
So
2023. Offline 2023.
2023, I'm pretty sure Spargo has won the majority of their sets so that you could call Spargo a counter for the year.
Right, right. But it's pretty close. I think whenever I strap in and I watch a Spargo versus Sonic set, I feel like it's a coin flip. It's like whoever's playing better, and then it's like what fucking character is Spargo gonna pick? Like there's a lot of different factors, and even it's crazy. I'm just gonna talk about like Sonic's performance at lmbm. I thought
Mhm.
Sonics was not playing that great. I don't know how you guys felt about his performance at lmbm. I did not think he was playing that good, and he still got second place. That's really good. In terms of like, I'm watching his gameplay. I'm like, dang, like drop that. Like, I feel like Sonics wouldn't do that there. Very surprised he didn't like take more time or be more patient in this scenario or in this matchup or whatever, right? Like, I think just watching him play and seeing him place that high while he still wasn't really playing to his fullest was just goes to show how like well studied he is and stuff like that, and how good of a player he is that he's able to get that far without playing that well. I think there was moments he clutched up. The reverse 3 over Spargo. I think Spargo did some really questionable like ego plays. Like the counter on Corrin was mad weird. It was like
Oh, that's
all
hilarious.
way far away, and then like Spargo countered on Corrin, and then like that was the moment where I was like, oh man, what's going on here? And then yeah, I thought like again, I just thought Sonics wasn't playing that great, but I still think Sonics is so well studied, and I think I mean outside of that SmashCon performance, he's so consistent. He's so consistent with his character. He's really motivated. He's well studied, and then his character, I just don't think the character has a like obviously Sonic has weaknesses and like the weight was something we got to see. I think the weight coming into play, especially versus Diddy Kong, that can convert halfway across the screen with like a smash attack or something like that. Like, oh, far range, so I can kind of contest spin dash or any spin move, right? Because the banana just
Mm.
laying on the ground can contest it, so it forces Sonics up in the air. Which I mean, Sonics when he's in the spin dash or spin charge, your hitbox is smaller than your hurtbox. It's a small hurtbox, but you're not protected that much by a hitbox, right? And then on top of that, the things like banana and stuff are disjointed, so you can be getting beaten out of aerials. And I think we saw a lot of this, especially versus SkyJ, where SkyJ wouldn't really contest the spin dash in the actual like a roll distance away from the actual spin, which is where we see most characters do it. But SkyJ would kind of like go forward and then kind of jump back and be like, oh, I think you're going to jump around this area, preemptive nair. And we see Spargo and Leo do this a ton with Corrin, right? Where it's like, I'm not trying to fight spin dash. I'm trying to get you to spin dash. And I think you're going to end up in this general area, put really big hitbox in general area.
Mm.
Hope I hit you, convert, right? So
That's a Mexican undershoot.
pretty much,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
they're really good at it. So, and I mean, some characters that's the only way you can play against Sonic, because some characters just simply cannot approach into spin moves like Incineroar, right? Like there might be some options you have like dash attack or something that kind of propel them forward, but it's tough. So yeah, I would lock in Sonics as my answer, and I also like having the dominating. He has like the Spargo effect that it's like, okay, you dominate a cola, right, which is a huge plus. Mia, a little bit more shaky. I think Mia's a bit more well-rounded when it comes to specifically the top four. And then from there, it's just the consistency to get to that top four or top eight consistent. I think Sonics definitely has what it takes, and I think any of these four players are gonna be a right answer. But if I had to pick one for the next, the first 6 months of 2024, I would lock in Sonics. I think his his performance on the tail half of 2024, especially since we got to see him finally fight Mia and Nicola, were huge, and I just feel like he's on a huge momentum swing. And again, him playing that bad and still getting second at lmbm was so wild to me. Like very hats off to him. I don't want to say he played very well, but he made the best out of how he was playing, and he still got second place at lmbm, which was very impressive to watch.
Yeah. Um yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one, man. Because like, yeah, if you do look at like kind of the numbers right now with the top four, it's kind of crazy that we have this clear and by far number one being Akola, but going into 2024, like even Mia's taking like some sets now, right? Like Mia's
Yeah,
doing
he
some
had a
stuff
3-win
now.
streak versus him
Yeah,
recently, and then
yeah,
Akola won the most recent set, which
right.
like won him the tournament at Umiboro. But yeah,
Yeah, and but it's like it's one of those things where now a like Akola's dominance is being challenged by Mia in his own region, right? And then it's like now you have a whole new other person in Sonics that also just lol. And let me just run through you right now, right? Like obviously we'll see if he's able to adapt, right? But so far, like just kind of like what we've seen with Spargo, it's like, dude, it almost looks kind of comical, like how these guys just like it just looks so like overbearing, like how they just like blow through him, and
mm-hmm.
he doesn't really put up that fight. So yeah, it's going to be interesting because, well, we talked about it before where it was this weird thing where like Spargo obviously is like killing it. He's got some of these losses, he didn't have the consistency, but he still has a really high consistency, and he's also beating the person that everyone's perceived to be number one. But what happens now when you add in someone else who is hella consistent, and is dominating aola in Sonics, and now even one of your own countrymen who's also able to challenge you, right, for the Japanese throne, so to speak. So I think it's going to be a really interesting year to see, man. And I think for aola, he's there's a, like, if he is to get number one again, there's got to be some really big shifts in terms of the way he's playing right now, I feel like. Because, like, dude, it's pretty wild how some of these people are playing against him right now. And I do think that you could see a shift more there when, to like Tony's point and kind of what I was saying earlier too, as people progressively get better at playing against these characters. We still have people at that level outside of those top four who just aren't really playing it as well as they need to be in order to challenge someone like aola. But you're seeing it now with people who are talent. They have the skills, like their general skills, and they also have the matchup stuff, and they're just making them look foolish, right? Like, you're having your number one look foolish by multiple people. That's like such a weird thing to say, right? But that's just kind of the situation we're in. So I think 2024 is going to be hella dope to see there. I think if people are paying attention and really taking all this information to heart, you could see a resurgence of a couple other, like, characters and players that have kind of been at a point where it's like it seems like they're locked out because of the dominance that we've seen from aola and like Weber. But yeah, I really love that, and also love I'm really excited to see what Mia is able to do specifically, just because, dude, I love his energy, man. Even at like Watch the Throne, just had a notion that he was just like, yeah, man, hey, you want me to teach you how to play against aola, man? No, I got you, bro, by any means necessary. Like, he's my countryman, but he's not my man. Like, I was like, dang, like, what is happening? Like,
Yeah.
like Mia, like, he's a competitor, right? Like, obviously he's not doing anything crazy or shady, but he's hungry for it too. He's not sitting there just clapping, yay, aola number one. He's like, nah, that needs to be me. And I love that he has that kind of energy, right, and that kind of focus. So there's a all a lot of interesting avenues there. Also, it's been cool to see characters like Corrin kind of come into the fold more and more, right? And we're seeing Bayonetta, obviously, again, come more and more into the fold. So I personally even have, like, for me, I want to see what characters pop off, like, with, like, and also like what the top four kind of like move towards, right? Are we going to see more of this Spargo Corrin come through? Um, are we going to see aola deem that he needs to, like, really needs to lock in like an actual, like, super legitimate Aegis or something, because he's just getting so thrashed, in the, as when he's playing Steve, right? Like, I'm really curious to see that as well too from these guys, because we've just seen that kind of dynamic. Like, you see people pick up these characters sometimes. You're like, okay, they're picking up these characters. Is this really going to do anything? And no, they've been actual legitimate counter picks, right? And I feel like we haven't seen that for a little bit now, where people are really having some of these characters actually, shift some of these sets, as it were. So who knows, man? But these guys, they're playing at a insane level, and it seems like every time these guys interact, we're seeing some new things here and there. I do agree with you, Charles. I think Sonics is probably going to end up being number one, unless we see, like, maybe there's a shift, right? For Spargo, I mean, Spargo's being a legend, so, like, you don't know, but, like, I feel like the way that Sonics has been moving has been really fascinating for me to see, and I feel like at this point in time, I think this may be his time. But Spargo, he's definitely pissed about 2023, right? So,
Yeah.
and angry Spargo, can't count him out, man. He's someone where when he feels disrespected, he's gonna come through. So we may get the year of the coin box, where it's just freaking these guys,
Amen.
battling at it here, unless aola and Mia have something to say. But yeah, it's so fascinating. Like we're outside, if you're just looking amongst them and them like going against each other, like you can't put akola even in number 2 just off those like how their matchup spreads, right? So like between each other, which is fascinating.
So I think that akola. So each player obviously has a different asset that they bring to leverage to get their consistency. I think that akola's is the most proactive in that his adaptations generally revolve around him having a just unparalleled bag of low risk, high reward situations or approaches to the matchup through Steve. And he rotates them through and kind of feels out his opponent to see which ones work. And then he looks at the dartboard through the set. And then by game 5, he just picks everything that works and just kind of throws all the biggest darts at the board. Now, this has worked out for him extremely well, and you can't deny the effectiveness. However, you can also see that for the players who actually do know the Steve matchup well enough to have been familiar and know the counter for every single dart and be practiced enough to counter every dart on reflex, the I also think that you can't deny how effective they are against akola. And he is indeed looking for characters that aren't Steve against those players, although I think he'll still continue developing Steve. I'm not sure what mixture he's going to approach, but I believe that he started investigating Roy more in Japan. Like he's used Roy in a couple of brackets successfully for the record. So I believe he's won a couple brackets with Roy. He is, I think he's planning on playing against Sonics with Roy in particular, which obviously I don't think Sonics is too sad about. For reference, Sonics sat at a rotation versus Kola and Mujin for about an hour to prepare for one of his round 1 pool opponents who was playing Roy. And I don't think he lost a game for like 45 minutes against 2 of the best Roys in the country.
Yeah.
Like he's very comfortable in that matchup. It's not a bad matchup for Roy either.
It's not.
It's just a matter of Sonics is particularly adept on both sides of the matchup and plays the matchup a lot, stays fresh. So I'm not sure how akola is going to match up. Obviously, there's plenty of good Sonics in Japan, like Taikei, Ken, obviously. They're going to give him some very good experience. But in history, we haven't seen Japan's Sonics prepare well for Sonics, the player. Having experience against those 2 has not typically translated to success over here. Likewise, there's plenty of clouds over in Japan that has not translated to success against Spargo for either Mia or akola. I think that Mia has a stronger foundation. In fact, if I had to say a player who has the best shield defense in the game, I would say it's Mia. Now, that's going to be pretty obvious for most people because Game & Watch has the best at B in the game. Yeah. But independent of
Game & Watch's defense
is
pretty good too, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a coincidence. So is mine.
That's crazy.
So Mia's movement is entirely based around option selects. Like he's fishing for parries constantly. And people
Parry
see
up
him
B
and
is insane, by the way. Parry into Game & Watch up B is like crazy. That is a cracked option.
Yeah.
It is, and more importantly, he is so good at hit confirming these things that he'll like go for a parry nair, and then if he gets the parry, he'll like dash grab on reaction sometimes. And obviously, it depends on how much pressure he's under, like state of competition, et cetera, But just like he's the only one doing that I'm aware of on a consistent basis, and so he can kind of like flip different switches where he's looking for different ways to outplay the opponent. So even if you can counter a Game & Watch up B or do something, like I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the players who have beaten Meister, regardless of how challenging the matchup is, have then played Mia and lost. And it's not because Mia's just that much better than Meister. It's a matter of, well, if Mia sees you beating this one aspect of Game & Watch, he'll switch to another. And we're seeing that against even like Gluttony. Gluto has taken multiple sets for Mia, and that matchup is atrocious. But Gluto is just that good of a player, but Mia is also just that good of enough of a player that he can see, oh, how I play to beat almost everybody else is not working. These examples of how I've seen Meister consistently beat Gluto are working, and I'm capable of emulating that because he can play like an entirely different player and change his playstyle up to do what works. It's so incredible to see. And so I think Mia is going to scale into whatever gameplay situations or whatever gameplay environment is ahead of him better than aola. But I'm also not willing to count aola out because he's a fiend for a reason, and he has all kinds of DLC backup characters that I've seen. Like I've watched Akola's Kazuya on stream before. Like you don't see it very often, especially when it comes over to North America. But he's got a lot of different branches that he can travel out. People tend to think of Akola as being carried by Steve, but make no mistake, he would still be like a top 10, top 20 player without Steve. Like if you were to ban Steve today, he would still be up there. And so the idea here is that I'm not sure how he's going to branch out against top 5 players, though, without Steve. So that's the question. And it's definitely a problem Akola is close to solving, like positionally. Having a top 10, top 20 players wanting to beat 1 or 2 specific people. We've seen that all the time. There's all kinds of players who can beat like 2 or 1 or 2 of the top 4 players. So, like, for example, using Tweak, who won Let's Make Big Moves. We've seen him beat Sonics. We've seen him beat Spargo. I already mentioned Gluto. He's beaten Mia. He's beaten Spargo. Obviously, DeBuzz has beaten Akola. He's beaten Sonics. So there's multiple players who can take sets off of multiple of these top 4. And so those players are certainly not out of the race whatsoever. And then, of course, Spargo's probably the best fighting player. Like in terms of really just interacting and coming out on top and keeping his tempo, countering his opponent's tempo, and just through just sheer raw skill. I don't think anybody stands next to Spargo. Like he just does it better than anybody. And that's something else that I think is going to scale in any game Spargo ever decides to play.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm obviously biased towards Sonics. He has the strongest foundation of all because part of what makes Sonic so strong is, and part of what gives Sonics that consistency, he was not standing with the other 3 players in this list at the beginning of 23, but we have seen him steadily improving from 22 and going into late 22 into early 23 into late 23. His growth hasn't stopped. It's steady, and he doesn't fall back. There is no drop in consistency. Once he gets there, he stays there. Once he started making top 8s, he stayed making top 8s, but he would just lose once he was there. Started making top 4s, he stayed in top 4s, was consistently making top 4s. Now we're seeing him make grand finals. How many months has it been since Sonics has been outside of grands? Like it's just consistency. And to go back to Charles's SkyJ example, I know I heard a common criticism was that Sonics didn't camp versus SkyJ is an example. We were testing out and kind of labbing what he was going to do to play the matchup, looking over a game plan for it, which was already done ahead of time. But I basically tried to emulate what my perception of SkyJ's habits were. And so including the undershoot, something that SkyJ will do is he'll kind of scout out to see how the opponent reacts, and then he'll go up and he'll go for essentially a 50-50, and he'll actually challenge the spin dash. So here's the thing. If you're a little off on the spin dash release and you don't get the invincible hitbox, you can get caught. Yeah, you just get smacked. If you try to release it early to catch before the grab can come out, that's something else SkyJ will do is he'll just get the revenge. And we actually did see that come up sometimes. Sometimes what he'll do is he'll actually dash up to the spin dash and go ahead and just revenge. Now, that has to be a timing read, but the idea here is that you can't just time it differently without opening yourself up to something else. And so after we played that and we tested his efficacy on different mix-ups, we decided that trying to camp him out and just go for the spin was not working. And the set would have looked very different. Maybe it would have still worked out about the same and they still would have gone game 5. But the idea was that he was supposed to win that set, not by playing the matchup the way you would think it would be played or the way that Incineroar is going to struggle to play, but by trying to kind of push harder than Incineroar. And I think that people saw it as, oh, you're trying to outplay somebody on their own skill set that they're strong at. You should attack them where they're weak. Well, we decided that Sonics was also going to be weak there. And so whenever you have two things that are equal, you attack them with the tool that you have that's strongest. Like whatever tool in your bag that currently is most best for you. And so the idea is, are you trying to not lose the game or are you trying to win the game? And so the idea was we switched tracks to not trying to avoid SkyJ, but so much as kill him before he kills you.
So you're just avoiding the 50-50 Alolan Whip mix-up in the corner because Sonic is light and you don't want Sonics to corner himself. So it's
with
like...
the revenges. Yeah.
Right.
And
so
more specifically...
Yeah, I guess the game plan is more like, instead of going into the corner and like, if SkyJ center stage and you're in the corner, don't let him get close enough to be Alolan Whip range. It's better to just rip the spin dash and have like some kind of air to air interaction, right? Whether you're air dodging through or you're like fighting him air to air with like your Nair or something like that. Is that more of the idea?
Something like that. So there is more to winning neutral than just trying to hit your opponent. What you hit your opponent with determines whether or not you won neutral. If you hit your opponent with a jab and they just pop out and then both characters get like frame neutral, or even if you're just slightly plus, if you can't do anything to set up pressure after that, you did not win neutral. You just reset neutral from neutral. Big deal. Like you're not going to win the
damage. Like,
yeah,
you got some damage. Like that's it.
You're not going to win the game with Fox Lasers. That's not how you win games. Right. The only value Fox Laser really has is either under niche circumstances, like, oh, my move just needs to be X number of slots staled, or oh, I just need exactly this much more percent for my next combo to work. Outside of that, the biggest advantage you can have as Fox Laser is for your opponent to play around Fox Laser. So it's mostly just a conditioning tool that's not real. It's just a fake conditioning tool. And so same concept there. The idea is we knew what we wanted to connect. We knew it Incineroar/SkyJ wanted to connect. We knew how SkyJ was going to do it. And so the focus was, well, hit him where he's setting up, because where he positions himself for that is what's going to set up for you best. And so, yes, I think overall camping Sonic versus Incineroar is generally better based on the tools that we had in the tool bag at that specific event during that specific time, based on what we expected SkyJ to have in his specific bag at that specific time. It's important to, if your usual tool isn't going to work or it's dulled for some reason, do you have another tool in your bag that can work? And so what Sonics has that most players don't have is he has a very large bag of tools. He can play the game in completely different ways. Mm-hmm. If it's not just as simple as, oh, he's going to attack or he's going to camp. There's different ways to attack. And so what you saw him doing to basically outfight SkyJ, because at the end of the day, he still won the set. And what it came down to is he just
like it. Mm-hmm. It definitely seemed like things were clicking together game 5.
Yeah.
So it's about like reading their tempo, not just what they're going to do. Both players knew what the other player was going to do. You can know RPS is coming, and oh, of course Sonic's going to spin dash at me. I'm going to revenge. Well, when are you going to revenge, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's the main difference, is just having that foundation and having that steady improvement is what I think sets Sonics apart. So that's my opinion on that.
Nice. All right, so I think another topic that we could talk about is just like how ranks 6 through 10 do against the other top players. So I think that's also a really, really big deal. Just like check this chat real quick. All right. Yeah, I mean, Bam, if you got to head out, me and Tony can close it out.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
All right, so Bam's got to head out, guys, but me and Tony are going to, close up this topic. Probably got another like 15 or 20 minutes left. But yeah, I mean, did you have any closing thoughts, Bam, or you just got to dip?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, my closing thoughts are like, I think that despite how people are, I feel like we had a lot of kind of negative energy coming in towards the end of 2023, right, about the state of the game. And I think there's a lot of, honestly, like exciting things to look forward to. I think it's very interesting that we are having where, and I really love that Tony really stated this, that like, yeah, like MkLeo without Steve is not a top. He's not doesn't all of a sudden fall to like a top 100 player or something, like he's someone who's still extremely strong player. And even with that, piloting a character like Steve, you're seeing like this like desecration by freaking Spargo and Sonics, right? You're seeing Mia, jump up to the bat, and you're just seeing like a lot of talented players just make moves, right? So I'm really interested to see what are the next steps here for a lot of players, in particular like Mia and Akola, because they definitely have a problem to solve right now. And I think as of right now, Sonics and Spargo, their focus is on each other and getting to that number one spot. So it's been cool to see that kind of shift, right? From going to Akola, going from MkLeo, being a dominant one, then we see this immersion of Spargo, then all of a sudden Akola comes around, and now it looks like Spargo alongside with Sonics, and now it looks like these guys are the ones who are running to that number one spot, right, going into 24. So yeah, man, I'm hyped. I'm actually really hyped to see what changes we see here, and I love the idea of this like this really close knit global dynamic that we're seeing as well, between all these four players, right? Um, it's been refreshing. It's been refreshing to see that around the world you're seeing the best of the best emerge, and yeah, and there's still players in the wings, right, trying to find their way in there, right? We saw what Tweak was able to do, right? So yeah, a lot of stuff that I really am invested in, especially going into Genesis. So yeah, but I'll catch you all soon.
All right, peace out, Bam.
All right, peace.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing too is now I want to start branching into the discussion outside of the top four, how the top four interact with like the top 6 through 10 or five, yeah, ranks like 5 through 10, or like the top 20 and stuff like that. Because to me, it's so weird because when I think of Sonics, I think his biggest hurdles aren't even within the top four. Well, the biggest hurdle within the top four, or I guess his biggest hurdle in general, is going to be Spargo. Um, and I think if Spargo got rank one or Sonics, I'd be like super happy. Like in terms of the character I want to see, I love Cloud, so it would be really sick to see Spargo do it. But I just think again, my opinion, my bet, if I was a betting man, it would be on Sonics. But Spargo, like you said, the most skillful player of the four, in my opinion, and as yours as well, right? Just plays really quick, has a very high refresh rate, just so hard to beat out in scrappy situations, right? But when I think of all the top or of all the other players like ranks like 5 through 15, we're starting to see other players start picking it up and understanding the new meta, being like Game & Watch and Akola, right? We saw Gluto recently take a set off of Mia. Mia did win the run back in losers, and also take Akola to game 5 at Umibor very recently. So really sick to see Gluto figuring even more crazy impossible matchups out with Wario. I think for Gluto, the biggest thorn in his side is probably Sonics, right? And it's just so crazy to me because even when I think of players, usually when players struggle against the top four, they struggle against one half of the top four, right? You look at Tweak. Tweak struggles a lot against Akul and Mia, but I mean, our sample size with Sonics is very low. And again, I thought at lmbm Sonics wasn't playing that well, but Sonics has a good amount of set wins on Tweak as well, right? So, but as of recent, Tweak was able to take it over him at lmbm. But like, I feel like Tweak, whether he beats Sonics or not, he's a lot more comfortable against the player or the player / character lineup, right? He's played them before. He understands and knows what their characters do, right? But I think Tweak can struggle versus Akola, specifically Akola Steve, and then Mia's Game & Watch / Steve, right? When we look at Light's the same way. Will struggle versus Akola and Mia, but maybe has a more comfortable time with Sonics and Spargo. Can go back and forth with both players, right? So it always feels like it's like, okay, which group are you struggling versus? Is it the Akola Mia train, or is it the Sonics Spargo train that you struggle with in terms of characters? So yeah, I guess I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, Tony, because I thought it's a very interesting topic coming into this new era, because I feel like a lot of people are slowly figuring out Steve and Game & Watch. I still think there's a lot of catching up to do, but then Sonics and Spargo, they're more on like the quote unquote traditional character side, where some of these more experienced players might have a more comfortable time at the very least. I'll use the word comfortable, where it's like, okay, they fought these characters before, right? They know the drill. They just got to beat the player, right?
first thing I'll note is that specifically in context, I think that a lot of players are under the impression that Ultimate is a very inconsistent game. And so we're talking about this inconsistency, but
But there's still players that are just like clearly on top.
yes, yeah. So uh the idea is like if you're one of the top 99.99% of the players, uh you might be able to take a set from like one or two of these players, but you're not taking a set from all four. It just doesn't happen. Like, so
Yeah.
the idea there is, I think that when we're looking at overall tournament winnings, the number 5 is clearly Gluto. So
Yeah.
Gluto being, I believe, the only other player who's won a Premier outside of the 4.
I believe so. Yeah. Terra.
So, yes.
Yeah.
So, basically, that I think that's generally regarded as the top 5 for on the world stage at this point. And so the idea there is that from that point, we also have other players. So first of all, someone else who is making second place at multiple of these grand finals is Tweak. So we see Tweak there at a lot of these events. Light probably has the best overall record, having taken. I think he's the. I could be incorrect on this, but I believe Light is the only player who's taken a set from all 4. Oh, no, sorry, 3 of the 4. I don't think he's taken a set from me yet, has he?
I don't think so. No, he's never beaten me.
Okay, so
I think he's
between you
only
and
had
me,
like 1 or 2 sets, but I don't think he's ever beaten me. And
I
that
think
man,
the
I
light
wish
will
we
get
ran
it
the
every
numbers on
week.
that, like from ranks like 5 through 10 or whatever. Like, how many of the 4 horsemen have you taken a set off over, or whatever? Right?
Mhm.
Like that's cool.
It's something I was thinking about before, and I'm pretty sure that Light might be the only person to take a set from 3 of them, unless Shuton has done work that I'm not aware of.
Oh,
So
right. Because I mean, there's so many Japanese tournaments, and it's
yeah,
impossible to keep up with all of them, especially if you don't live there, because the time difference is so skewed.
yeah, but then the short list of Japanese players who have taken a set from either Sonics or Spargo is very short.
Mm-hmm.
So there's basically like T, Shuton, et cetera. But I'm pretty sure T doesn't take a set from the Japanese kings, so to speak. So from there, obviously, you have, let's see, there's the Buzz I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
before is taking a set from multiples. Also makes it to grand finals at these P tiers. So I don't know why I'm having such brain fog on the top 10, but the first person who comes to mind, even though I think he's going to be ranked like in the teens, is Mudace. Obviously, I'm a big Mudace fan, but something else going into 2024 that we're going to have is anybody who follows Mudace is he has steadily been practicing his tool assisted combos. Yeah, he's been practicing since
Unemployed
October.
combos.
His unemployed combos. So he, I specifically told him that I didn't expect him to have those combos tournament ready within 23, and I don't know if he'll have it ready by Genesis, but at the level of work it looks like he's putting in, he might be ready by Genesis. And
Exciting.
I think that's one of those situations where it's kind of binary of, does your character one touch or two touch? And if your character one touches, it's literally twice as good. Like, what if you only had to take a stock and a half instead of 3 stocks? Like, it's just ridiculous. So the idea there is that we have that going up on the come up. Japan's always a melting pot of up and comers. Like, there's all kinds of exciting things we can see coming out of Japan, because the hardest thing to detect about Japan is who's going to be flying to North America to scare people. It's not actually based on just watching the Japanese scene. It's based on just what people's personal financial situations are.
Yeah,
Like,
that's one thing I hate. I feel like even kind of guessing the rankings for 2024, like the first 6 months, I wish I could just be like, all right, so tell me how many times Sonics will fly to Japan for majors, and tell me how much Spargo will fly to Japan. Whoever has the most flights to Japan, I will say that
number one.
they have the better chance, right? And it's not even off of like, the first assumption I made was off of just like player skill combined with like, how consistent they've been, how, rock steady the climb has been, and how much they've been like studying and stuff like that. So I think it does really come down to a big factor is how much times will Sonics and Spargo fly to Japan. And I don't think it's necessarily a free win for them, but they go at the right times. It's a P tier, and they have a very good matchup spread at least against the two best Japanese players. They just got to make it to them, right? So as long as they make it to them, which even, it was crazy. Spargo didn't even do that the first time he went to Japan. Kaguri B10, he got upsetted by Yada super early and still made the losers run all the way to Grands and like essentially freed up aola and Grands, right? Like,
oh yeah, that was bad.
So that was a long time ago, but the more of those, the more of those types of tournaments we see Sonics and Spargo travel to, that's huge points for them coming into the rankings.
Well, we've seen Spargo in that environment, but something that we see a lot is players flying from North America or even Europe go to Japan and just absolutely get ramshackled. And whether it's a combination of jet lag, which goes both ways, Japanese players come to North America and they have jet lag from hell too. So you have to keep in mind that a lot of North American players go over to Japan, and we don't know. There's no evidence that says Sonics isn't going to be one of them. So we would actually have to see that in practice before we say, now, do I think Sonics is going to do it? Obviously. But
there's also precautions you can take, right? If you fly like maybe 2 or 3 days before the event, maybe just like, just for your body to get acclimated and stuff like that. Like there are tactics. And again, does that cost more money? Yes. See, right. Like there's all of these different things that come to these, decisions, and it just doesn't involve like being good at the game, right? So
poverty esports strikes again.
Yes.
So something we didn't mention that should be at the forefront of everyone's mind is Leo going to be number 1 in 24? So
dude, he's been cooking.
There is so for those who haven't seen Let's Make Big Moves, he got 4th at the tournament, but he got 4th beating Spargo, losing game 5 to Spargo, losing game 5 to Tweak. So like he was a few interactions away from winning that tournament, possibly, depending on how everything else went. So you can't sleep on Leo. And you keep in mind, this is Leo slowly on his own relative come up. So Leo had multiple events in a row where he wasn't making top 8. He's in top 8 and he's back and he's almost beating the people who win the tournaments.
Yeah.
He's going to keep improving. It's not like we don't know for a fact that he can do it. He's done it more and better than anyone else.
Also seems somewhat over. Like it's kind of just like it feels like he's like, fuck it, send Joker. Like, and I'm all for it. You know what I mean? At this point of the meta, so
he can do it every once. He just has to pick a character and practice. And go. That's literally all exactly.
Like we just need a commitment. Like I think Leo can do it. He can win with multiple characters. I think at this point, it's just he's not that far ahead of everyone that he can spread himself that thin and win with 3 characters at the same time. He might have to win with 2 or 1 characters at the same time, but never doubt Leo's skill. Like he can definitely fuck people up with whoever he wants to.
Leo is a victim of the counterpick meta mentality where everybody was like, oh, I need 5-6 characters for my roster. What if my opponent bans my champ? That's just not how that works. You pick 1 or 2 characters. If you're doing 3, you're an anomaly. But once you start getting up there, what it comes down to is, did you wake up and go jogging every morning for your respective sport? Like, it's not a matter of, oh, well, how many characters do you have in the pocket? It's a matter of what is your consistency with the tools that you have? Because at this point, we are seeing SkyJ making it through top 8s and having very close sets with the best players in the world. It's not just the character. The players matter at least as much as the character at this point. And so these are very excellent players making very excellent reads. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of how or does your high risk, high reward option pay off for you or for your opponent? Because a lot of the times it comes down to the willingness to make these close die rolls and get the hits. So we're already to the point where more and more often we're seeing what's essentially suicide stocks, where people are just going for all or nothing KO setups on a regular basis. Yeah. Like you'll see Spargo in particular, like I was talking about him scrambling. he will, without question, without hesitation, go off for a runoff fastball, down air, forward air that he can't recover from. And sometimes they don't pay off, and you'll just see him lose a stock, and somebody will say, "Oh, Spargo's throwing." No, he's not throwing. I cannot communicate enough how much having that killer instinct is a skill, how valuable that is. That's something that requires you to develop, like that lack of hesitation, that just reaction, that sense for, oh, I can take the stock right now. I'm going to, and not even thinking it through as a sentence. You just reflexively know, kill, and just go for it. That is something that is unique to Spargo. That's unique to players like Light. These are players where when you go for that, if that was even a passing thought in your opponent, pressure is a tangible resource that we can actually measure. It impacts the opponent's reaction times. It impacts their decision making. It can turn an entire RPS tree on its head. If you've ever seen a player where they were doing something that was working the whole set, and all of a sudden it just seems to stop working, that's probably pressure at work. It is a very powerful thing, and it comes to those who take risks and are willing to take those risks. And not everyone in those top four are players who will do that. Like players like Mia, players like aola, to a lesser degree, players like Sonics. Now, to be fair, Sonics pushes the envelope for what he's willing to do, but Spargo is the only one of those four who's just willing to say, my stock is gone. I think I got value from this. And so the other three are they'll go out really far and push what their characters are capable of doing. And their characters are capable of going out very far. But at the end of the day, they're still planning to come back and play the next stock. Spargo isn't always. And so I think that the more we are getting players who have that kind of killer instinct, just get a little bit more consistent on making those high variance plays. A little bit of consistency goes a long way when, again, the difference between a stock and a half versus 3 stocks. It's a big deal. And so speaking of another player who we typically have is a mainstay of 23 who has kind of not shown up as much at the end of 23 because he literally has not shown up, is like Riddles.
Right.
So Riddles and T are leading Kazuya's on the planet, and they haven't really been coming out to events like they were at the beginning of 23. Those are still wild cards who can beat just about everyone on the planet.
AK,
like
Zomba, like there's so many, dude.
Yeah, Zomba's obviously also been on the come up. I think he kind of fades out of people's memories because he's like just a single step below, or he'll just have one unfortunate loss here and there. Likewise with AK, he's just one unfortunate loss here or there from just being at the forefront of people's minds. I can't tell you how many times I've seen him where he just like barely loses his top 8 set, but he's very close to consistency, and he is also regularly improving. So like any of these players where they're just regularly improving, I have high hopes for them, because whether it's now or maybe even 25, they're going to get there. It's just the process works. And anyone I see following the process, I know that they're going to get there because I know the power of that process. And different people are going to travel that path, different speeds. Sometimes their paths will be longer than others, but they will get there. It's just a matter of sticking to it. Again, consistency. Are you waking up and going for the jog every morning? Like these really incredible players. They really are.
Yeah, for sure. And I can't wait to watch all of these incredible players compete in 2024 as they had incredible performances in 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Again, if you guys do enjoy the content and want to support us, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on Spotify as well. And if you want to ask us questions, go ahead and subscribe to our Discord, which will be in the link below. And until next time, class dismissed.